Hey folks, what is going on? This is part 3 with Tableau, and we're going to check out charts and tables today. We're going to move away from maps. But just like maps, the charts and tables will have some regular guidelines or actions that you'll perform, but a lot of it is going to be up to you and how you want your visualization to look like. You know, what colors do you want to use, what sort of design you want to use, and charts in particular, what type of chart do you want to use? A pie chart, a line chart, bar chart, etc. So I'm going to walk you through the steps, and we're going to use two different files, and I'll show you them right now. I posted them online. The first one that we'll create a chart for is called NBA salary by year, and we'll create a table off NFL injuries. Now, charts I would create for the observer to, sort of give a quick visualization for a story. Tables are a little bit different. The tables are actually, we kind of post a trimmed down version of our data, and that, one, it helps any curious readers, but two, it also helps with transparency, where the readers could see what data we're looking at for our analysis. So let's check out NBA salary by year. I'm going to open that file up, and you can see it's in an Excel file, and it's a really basic spreadsheet, and it has the leading salary maker for all NBA players by year. So you can see in 1991, Patrick Ewing, he led the NBA in salary at $4.25 million. And then David Robinson in 1993 with $5.7 million. And you can scroll all the way down to 2018, Stephen Curry, $34.6 million. So my hell, salaries have grown in 20 or 30 years. So this is a simple spreadsheet, right? There are 27 records, 28 rows. And just to be sure, I'm going to take this and I'm going to move it from currency just a straight number. And I'm going to get rid of the trailing zeros. Okay. Now I'm going to save it and exit out. And I'm going to open up Tableau. And this, of course, is the main landing page for Tableau. And let's import the NBA salary data. And that data was a Microsoft Excel file. I'm going to double click on that, and I'm going to navigate to where I have it and open it up. And of course, once it opens up, you are presented with your data source. So here it is. We didn't get any kind of errors. In fact, Tableau is relatively good at importing. I rarely get errors. And there's our data all the way down to Stephen, right? So I'm going to create a sheet by clicking on sheet, and you've seen this several times already. This is our blank worksheet, and if you click on show me on the top right, they're all grayed out right now because we don't have any data selected, but you can sort of see the different types of charts and maps and tables we can create. And once you get an advanced Tableau, there's a lot of really cool things you can do that look just like a normal web page. You know, you can even add photos and text over top. But we're going to start basic, and we're going to pick out one of these charts that we think works the best. So we have our potential tables and charts on the right, and on the left, of course, we have our fields. Player field, and it's giving it an ABC, meaning Tableau is recognizing that field as a string or a text field. The year field has a number beside it, so it's saying, okay, that's a number, which it really isn't. So let's change that to a date. Right-click on year, change data type, and date. And you can see there's now a calendar next to a year instead of the number sign. And under measures, it has salary as a number, which is good, right? So let's experiment with a chart in this. And there can be a number of different charts. I see right off the top we could probably do a bar chart, a vertical bar chart, some sort of a line graph or line chart. So I'm going to take year and I'm going to drag it into columns, right? And I'm going to take salary and drag it into rows. Okay, so that gives me sort of the trend on salaries. You can see down the first person, which I think was Patrick Ewing, started off in 1991 with $4.2 million. Then it shoots up to 30 million. I think that's Jordan. And then it wiggles all the way up. And if we get rid of the show me, you can see it ends with 34 million right now with Steph. So we could run with something like this, right? You know, include the player's name, maybe add some color to it. So let's take player and drag it into our details box, because we don't want to necessarily add a row or a table or a column to it, but we drag it into details and all of a sudden our map gets all squiggly looking, right? That's not good. But let's click one of these charts. I'm going to try the line chart, right? And when I click line chart, Tableau has this problem, I would call it, of automatically putting our players from our details into our rows. So I'm going to get rid of that. I'm going to click remove. I'm going to X that out. Let's see if I remove it real quick. Okay, so I'm back with just this, and I think I had let's try year into a row. Okay, so here's a vertical chart, or a horizontal chart, I guess it would be, right? Why don't we try flip-flopping them? And we'll take year and put it into columns and salary down to rows. And again, with Tableau, a lot of it is just experimenting and seeing what works best. And I think it will work best in a sort of a linear format rather than top down. So I went year in column and I went salary in rows. Now that I think looks much better, right? We start with 1991, go all the way down to 2018. Now let me see if I take player and drag it into details. Nothing changes with my map or my chart itself, but now I have the player, I have his name across my data. There's Kevin Garnett, Shaquille, Kobe, and then we end in Steph. So I could work with something like this, right? It's easy to do, but it also tells a story, and it's really easy to understand. And that's one thing I like about charts, tables, and maps. I like it when they're easy to understand. So if I'm just scrolling through something on my phone or on my laptop, I don't have to scratch my head to say, what is the reporter trying to tell me here? Okay, so you can also, let me see if I take player, if I drag that into color. There we go. So that is a little bit better, right? It sort of groups the players together by color, like Kevin Garnett's all green, Shaquille is pink, and so on. But if I was an NBA fan, and if I really wanted to bump my map up a little bit, I could change the color to the actual color of the jersey that folks wore, right? So let's do that. I'm going to click on color and edit color. And because it's a dimension, it's sort of grouping them like a select and group by in SQL. So to change a color in this aspect, I can't just change it like I would a map where I'd pick a color scheme. I can change individual colors. For David Robinson, for instance, if I were to highlight David Robinson on the left And then he was with the Spurs, and the Spurs color scheme is white and black. So I'm going to try to find a darker color for him. So let's see if I can find a black or a white. I don't believe Tableau has white for some reason, but I might be able to find a gray. So that's what I'm going to do for David Robinson. I'm going to give him this gray. Click apply. Okay. Now you can see David Robinson down here is in gray. I'm going to do that for all the players. Kevin Garnett, I don't know if he was with Minnesota or if he was with the Celtics at the time, but I'm going to give him a green just in case he was with the Celtics. And Kobe was with the Lakers, so he can be yellow or purple. And I'm going to find a yellow for him. See if I can find a halfway decent color yellow. Green to gold. Larry Bird, he was with the Celtics. Give him a green. LeBron, he may have been with the Warriors or the Heat. So I'm going to give him a red. Jordan, of course, he's with the Bulls. I'm going to give him a different shade of red. Ewing was a New York Knick, so a blue or an orange. Shaq, he could have been with any number of teams, so I'll give him a purple just in case he was with the Lakers at the time. And Curry, maybe a light blue for the Warriors. Click apply. Click OK. So that's much better, huh? They're sort of color-coded by player. And you can see that Kevin Garnett had those years where he was sort of beat out by Shaquille for being the highest. But that's all right. And then you have Kobe with a lot. LeBron, Kobe, LeBron, Steph, etc. Okay, that's not too bad, right? Salary. I'd want to change that to a currency though, right? So let's do that. And of course you change the format by right-clicking on salary. Then default properties, because it's already a number. We want to go to number format. Currency. And I'm going to get rid of the trailing zeros. Click OK. Okay, that's good. And I'm trying to mentally run through my list. If I was creating a map, I might go up to map options and give it a background. But of course this is not a map, so I don't have to do that. Do I want to change the size at all? Let me see. I could increase the size a little bit. I could decrease the size. Go real small. It's your personal preference. I'm going to keep it sort of in the middle. Do I want to add a label? I don't think so. I think adding label names might just clunk it up a little bit. But I definitely want to change the tooltip, right? I want to make it pop a little bit. So I'm going to first center everything. Make everything bold. Change the font to a font that I personally like or think is easy on the eyes. And then finally change the color. And we can get rid of, I think we can get rid of all the lead-in characters because people are going to know that they're players and it's a year and the salary. And go ahead and pick some colors. Green, year, I'll make blue, and salary, I'll make red. Why the heck not, huh? And I like to separate some of the more important things with just hyphens that create a line. And I'm going to change that to black. Who knows how this is going to look, but I'm going to click OK. Kobe Bryant, 2011, $24 million. And again, this is all personal design. You may not even like the way that the bar chart or the line chart looks, and may go with something down here, or maybe one of these sort of the sphere or the circle charts, which I'll show you an example of later on. But this looks good enough for me. Has my salary data on the left, my years underneath. So if I were you, I'd save it at this point and then create a dashboard. And of course, we create a dashboard by clicking on Dashboard, New Dashboard. And this is where we put the final touches on our interactives, right? First thing we always do for dashboards is what? Change the size. And I change it to a fixed width. I always start with 700 because that's the width of the standard web page we use at the Observer. And because this one isn't as tall as it is wide, I'm going to give it a 500. And again, you can play around with that. Click floating before you actually drag your map into the space. This way, this is a personal preference I use. I know colleagues like to do the tiled, but I click floating. I take my sheet 1, which is essentially my map, and drag it over. You can see it automatically brings over our legend, which I'm going to put down to the side while I blow up my map to fit, or my chart to fit. There we go. Not bad, right? We got to do a couple things first. We have to maybe add some chatter. We have to find room if we want to keep the legend for the legend. And maybe change the font just a little bit. See if I move this over, sometimes it'll get rid of, it'll just call it like 35M, but it does not do that, so I'm going to keep it spread out though. Okay, so let's see if we can find some space for our legend. I'm going to drag it up here, and the good thing about this, it'll sort of cluster itself together to fit whatever space we choose. And if it has to add a scroll bar, it'll add a scroll bar. So I drug it into a blank space, and you can see right there, it added, it started building them off to the left and right instead of up and down. That's not too bad. Now, if you do keep your legend here, one thing I do see is it's reading that year behind, which personally I think we can get rid of, or we can just cover it up. And I'm going to cover it up by clicking on my legend, and then this drop down arrow here. Then Format Legends, and that brings up this information on the side, or I can add a shading to it. And right now it has no shading selected. I could add a color shading like that if I wanted. Or if you add just a white shading, it shades it as a white background, which is fine. Then a border, if you want to add a border, maybe a real light green one, and click off. So there it is. I'm going to bump up my border a little bit, and I'm going to try changing my text. And I should have thought of this earlier. Sometimes when you change the text, it also changes the border and the shading. But to change the text, just like we would change the text in a legend on a map, you double click the legend box. And now that I think of it, I don't even know if we need a header here, because people are already going to know that David Robinson's a player and Larry Bird's a player. So I'm just going to erase it, click OK, and I think that'll work, right? And you can resize it to fit. If I make it too small, it gives me this scroll bar, which maybe you might have to do with real small spaces. But in this case, I think I can get away with something like that. And maybe drag it over a hair just to make it equal. Again, this isn't perfect. There's a lot of things you can do with this, including changing the entire different map type. But this is a start. Now, what kind of chatter would we want to add? And do we even have room for chatter? Well, why don't we try a simple lead-in sentence or two? So I'm going to click on sheet 1 and say something simple that the reader can easily gain from the map, like MBA make a $sign with that. And I'm going to put leading MBA salaries. I think Steph made more than 34 in 2018. So how does something like that sound? Leading MBA salaries have grown significantly over the years, from 4.25 million in 1991 to more than 34 million in 2018. That works for me. Let's give this some color too. Bold it, change the type and the font. I have to make that darker so it's more legible, so I'm going to make it red. Okay, now of course my legend box bleeds into my chatter, so let's see if we can scoot that down a little bit to make it fit. And maybe I want to try making this chatter just one line, because you see I have million in 2018. So maybe I call that top MBA salaries. Have grown a lot over the years, from 4.2 million in 1991 to, maybe I just get rid of more than 34 million in 2018. Click apply, click OK. It's not terrible, right? It gets the point across, and it shows all of our information, and I'm going to get rid of this border if I can. I don't know if I necessarily need it, but I think it tells a quick story of our map, of our chart. What do you think? Pretty easy, but it's interactive, and I think personally a lot of NBA fans would find this interesting. I don't know if people know that salaries have grown that much, and of course our story would tell that. But again, this helps out visually for our story. So what do y'all think? It's making sense? And again, Tableau is a lot of just playing around with the different choices that you have to see what works best and what you prefer the most. Now do me a favor and save this one. Do File, save the Tableau public as, and for your own records, in case you need to refer to it for a class later on, save it as MBA salaries chart. MBA salaries chart. And let's try a table. Okay? And a table is this option right here. And what that will do is present the data so people can look at the actual data set that we looked at for our analysis. So I'm going to open up a new worksheet, and I'm going to load the second file that I posted online into that worksheet. Okay, I'm back to our landing page with Tableau. I saved the MBA salaries chart. Now open up Excel and load NFL injuries. Excel NFL injuries. And this data I think we looked at before. This has a little bit pared down, but it has all the injuries for a certain year in Excel, listing the player, the team, the position, injury, game status, and week that the injury happened. Right? Click on Sheet and let's get started. So here's our sheet. It's a blank sheet. You can real quick look at the dimensions and the measures and see that for the most part we don't have any numbers, so they should all be dimensions, right? Now let's think about where we want to put our data if we wanted to present it sort of like as an online spreadsheet. Okay, so let's try that. And I'm going to experiment with that by just loading up my rows column right here. Because if I think about it, most tables or spreadsheets are built with rows, right? We did that with the pivot tables, and you would do that even when you manually enter data. So I'm going to take player, drag it to rows. Then a lot of times if you have a lot of data that you want to present it, it'll give you a warning like this, saying, hey, we're going to put 1100 rows in. Are you sure you want to? It may slow things down, but of course we want to present all our records. So I'm going to say add all members. And there we go. There's all our players who had injuries during this NFL season. And what else is important? Well, what about team? So I'm going to drag team there. And you can see the team is populated. And you can also look up to the right to see that Tableau has automatically selected a table. You know, it's automatically saying, okay, this data, he's creating a spreadsheet with this data. Now we could add certain information like salary information and end up building a chart of our own, but we're interested in data today. So after team, let's add position, and let's add injury. Okay. So you can see that some of them have doubled up, like Aaron Can. He has 2 spaces because he's had a tricep injury and an unknown injury. And I bet you if you scroll down far enough, you'll see some that have even gotten more than 2 because they've had several injuries, like Anthony Hitchens of the Cowboys. He's had an ankle, groin, knee, and unknown. Okay, so let's add one more field. Maybe add the week. We'll see what that looks like. Just drag it and drop it to the end of the line. Okay, it's not too bad. Now one thing that Tableau does, and honestly I never looked into how to undo it, where it gives this last field, this ABC fields, because it's expecting us to count something. You know, count how often it happened or count a salary. But there's a way in the dashboard part to get rid of that. So I'm not going to worry about it right now. In fact, I think we have the basis of our field all right, or our data all right. And I think we can actually move on to the dashboard. And if there's anything that we want to come back and change, then we can change it. But we don't need to add a map option. We don't need to add a tooltip. The colors, I don't know if we could change much of the colors because there's nothing really selected, so we can't really change the colors. So a lot of that will be done in the dashboard. So I'm going to name this NFL injuries. Let's see if I do that again. NFL injuries. Now I'm going to create a dashboard. New dashboard. There we go. And the first thing we do with dashboards, of course, is resize it. Fixed size, 700. And this one's going to be a little bit different because this is going to be a real long table. So I think for the maps, we've done like 500 or 700. For the charts, I think it was a 500 height. Let's make this 1500. So this is going to be longer than it is wider. Click OK. Okay, so there's our blank display area. To rename this, I named it MFL. I name it NFL. I'm going to take my table right here, click on floating, and drag it in. And there's our data presented. Just need to make sure it fits with something like that. Right? Okay, now I'm going to stretch my fields out to make sure they fit. And I'm going to get rid of this ABC column that Tableau automatically added. So I'm going to stretch that out. You do that by grabbing the lines just like you would stretching a spreadsheet out. And you can see that Jacksonville Jaguars was on 2 rows. You can drag it as far as you can to make it on 1 row. And I think that gets rid of the ABC, right? But it also spreads out the names a little bit better so we can read them and they're not doubled up. Okay. Now let's add a little color to the chart because this is honestly pretty boring. So I'm going to click somewhere in my data, like click on a team for instance, then right click and change format right here. And honestly, I don't know why Tableau doesn't sort of specify what these do a little bit better. I had to find out just through trial and error. But to give it what they call a banding, to make certain rows a certain color, you click on this little paint right up in the center, the shading. Click that, then click down to row banding. Right? And I'm going to select a color. Maybe it's going to be like a lighter blue. Click off, and nothing really changes until you change the level. See that? Now every other player is banded. So Aaron Jones stays white, but Aaron Klein gets the color that I chose. And you can also switch this around to make it every 2 people or every 3. But I think every other works fine. That separates it visually. Okay. Now let's change the font to make the font pop out a little bit more. And to do that, I'm going to go back to format. And last time we went to shading right here. The very first one is a font. So click on font. And you can change the entire worksheet right here by doing a drop down. And just like our text boxes, you pick the color that you want. You can bold it. You can change the how big it is. And you can give it the style font that you choose. So I'm going to go to the one that I always choose. See how that looks. That's not terrible, right? And there are ways also if you wanted to choose certain colors for like the player's name or the team name, you can do that as well. Let's say we wanted to change the color for the headers. You click on columns, then header right here, and you can do the same thing. Let's if you want to make them blue, there we go. And if you wanted to bump up the font, there we go. So we're working our way. We're just sort of making the data look a little bit more presentable, right? And if you want to add like a row divider or a border, you click on this borders right here, then rows, and row divider. And this just makes your data pop a little bit more. So you can do that. And you can change the style, change the color, keep it black. make it bigger. I think a small one looks fine. And there we are. We're just making it a little bit more presentable for the readers, right? Now let's add some chatter. And this chatter can be really simple. And even though you and I know at this point that this isn't really a database because it doesn't have structure behind it and tables and queries, I think the average reader would call this a database. So we can say, search a database of NFL injuries. And I think this data was 2017. I think that's when the Observer ran their story. So search a database of NFL injuries in 2017. What about something real simple like that, to the point? And I've been using blue quite a bit, so I'm going to stick with blue. I'll bold it. I'm going to make it large because that's all I'm going to include. I'm not going to include any more sentences. And we'll see how this works. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger, actually. Click apply. And a little bit bigger. Click apply. Okay. Now the one thing I think that this would really benefit from is a search box or two, a filter box. Because we can always scroll down and find the player we want because they're in alphabetical order. And we can click here and find the team that we want by scrolling down, but that's honestly a pain in the butt. So let's add a filter box, okay? And to do that, go back to your worksheet, and you can see as we were updating our dashboard, our worksheet was changing as well. And in your worksheet, drag player to filter. Then click apply. Click OK. You can let's drag team to filter. Apply. OK. And injury to filter as well. Apply. OK. Now these are all three possible filters that we have when we're finishing up our dashboard. So I'm back at my dashboard, and remember how we looked at the filters on a map? We can do that the same way by doing the drop down, filter, and here are our filter options now. So let's add player first. And there we go. And you can see how it builds on top of it, of our data, which we'll have to find a place to put it, right? So how would you find a place? I mean, we could take our map over here and sort of scrunch it to the left and have a big blank column here. Or, now that I'm thinking about it, what if we go back to our title, right? And add a bunch of empty spaces to the bottom. Maybe 5 even. Click apply, click OK. Now, I probably don't need all 5, so I'm going to go back and get rid of 2. So I have 3 spaces underneath my title. Click apply, click OK. Now look, I have room for my filter boxes. Oops, I just grabbed my whole map instead. I just want my filter box. I can add player right here. Now I can go get my other ones. Filter, team. And remember, when you get a filter like this, what I like to do is use the wildcard. And you grab the wildcard by the drop down, wildcard match. And of course I don't want it to be that long, so I'm going to grab it and I'm going to shrink it to the size that I want. Alright. And I'm going to put that in the center. And finally, one more filter. Let's grab injury. Same thing. I'm going to do a wildcard. And I'm going to shrink it down to the size that I want. Still way too big. Keep shrinking it. And you do that by grabbing the one of the edges and just moving it down. Okay, now we're working through. What we can also do, we sort of have to, one, I'm going to center the titles. So highlight, center, and do the same thing for the team. Double click, center, and the same thing for the injuries. And again, you can change the color if you want. It doesn't have to. But the one thing I would change is I'd line all these boxes up. And you can see I sort of eyeballed them and they look alright. But I guarantee you they're not exact. And the way to do that is to click on a box, click on layout. And this gives us the position of each box. Like this one is starting 16 bits from the left and 46 bits down. You can see that 46 right here. When we click on this one's starting 41 bits down. So let's change that to 46. Then when you click off it, you can see that it shifted down a little bit. Now it's at 46. Same thing for injuries. That was at 42, 46. Now that shifted down. And what you can also do is change the size of the box. So this is 160 by 43. This one's 160 by 59. Let's make it 43 just to be uniform. And you can see that shrinks it a little bit. And this one is 160 by 52. Let's make that 43. There we go. Now at least they're the exact same size and they're positioned from the top down the exact same. And I could do some math and line up team in the center of the page, but honestly that looks good to me. So let's check it out. Let's see if Newton was injured this year and see if it works. Cam Newton. Okay, so Cam Newton. Hit enter. Maybe it's Cameron, so I'm just going to put Newton and see if that works. Hit enter, and there we go. Yep, he's Cameron Newton in NFL.com. And there are all his injuries for, which I said 2017. Shoulder injury for week 1 and week 3. And then, according to the NFL logs, he was listed with an unknown injury the rest of the year, which I think he had a concussion if I remember right. And to get all your data back, you just X that out. Same thing. I'm an Eagles fan, so we can click Eagles. Here are all the Eagles players that year that had injuries. Right? It's pretty good, isn't it? This is the same data that we would use to write our story and to base our story on. And one, because we want to be transparent, and two, because I bet you a lot of readers would find this interesting, we could post this online, right? And the last thing I would do is just add a source. And this, I believe, came from NFL.com. So I'm going to do that. And remember to add a source. You click on floating, click on text, and that gives you this blank text box. So you can say source, NFL.com, and you can change the font to make it a little bit more legible. And then you place it out of the way, but in a spot that readers can find. And to do that, I'm going to place it all the way at the bottom. First, I'm going to drag it down there. Then I'm going to change my map just a little bit, or my chart just a little bit, so I have room for my source information. Source NFL.com. And there we go. Now you can spice this up a lot by changing, a column color, changing some of the color up here for text. You can probably shade it a little bit differently by changing the format. Let me see if we can do that without actually changing the data itself. There we go. And then all I'd have to redo is recenter my text. Remember, once you change the format, you change any style of your text, it reverts back to the old style. So I have to center it again, but that takes about 10 seconds. And there we go. So that's a table in Tableau. Helpful, interesting, and again, it's up to you with the way you want to design it and the way you want to lay it out. So do me a favor and go to Tableau Public. I wanted to show you a few interactive charts and tables that I've done for the observer. And this will give you a little bit of idea of what can be done. And of course, this one, which is active North Carolina wildfires, active meaning when I did the story in 2016 versus yearly totals. And it's a simple bar chart like we did with the number of acres on the left being burnt, as well as the year running down at the bottom. And you can see in 2016, at the time of the story, 47,000 acres were burning at 15 fires in North Carolina, which was larger than almost every year here, except for 2008 had 49,000 and 2011 had 63,000. But keep in mind they were yearly totals, and what we were measuring was just the active wildfires in Carolina at the time. So that's one, just a quick bar chart that you can pretty much imagine what the data look like in Excel. Very simple. And here's another one, and this is inmate suicides at North Carolina prisons. And you can see how, again, this I could have done a bar chart, but I think a line chart or a line graph tells the story just as well. And you can see how it spiked. You know, in 2010, there were just one suicide in 2010 among inmates, and then in 2018, 12. So it increased 12-fold in an 8-year period. And I made this note that in 2016, you can see right here, that the state began a suicide prevention program. And the reason I put it there, because even though the state has that suicide prevention program, you can see how the drastic increase, even though that they implemented the prevention program. So again, pretty simple. This went along with our story and shed a little bit more light onto what was happening in the prisons. The other one that I'll show you is a table, sort of like the one we did, and this is a table of all the sacks by Julius Peppers, his pro sacks, that is. And we did this because he just moved into, I think, first place at the time on the all-time sacks list, or maybe it was second place. But again, you have all the sacks, and they're listed by year. So you start in 2002 when he entered the NFL, and you can see there, I believe there are 150 some, if I remember right, and it goes all the way down to, I believe, the 2017 or 18 season, 2017. There we go. And it has the sack number on the end, as well as the date, the team that Peppers played for, the team that he sacked, the quarterback that he sacked, and whether or not Peppers' team at the time won or lost the game. And we also, just to be completely accurate, put in whether it was a full sack or if he got a half credit. And you can see, like we did with the data we looked at, I also added a little banding to it just to break up the colors. And if you wanted to search an opponent, we'll search the Eagles, see if this still works. And there we go. It looks like he sacked Eagles players 5 times with several different quarterbacks. So that's an example of a table. And the last one that I'll show you is a map, actually. And this is a map of every county that either sent people to Mecklenburg County or where people from Mecklenburg County left in recent years. And I got this data from the U.S. Census Bureau. And if you can look at the key down here, you can see it's net migration data. So the orange counties are the ones that, in this case, sent people to Mecklenburg at the heaviest, and the blue counties sent just a few people to Mecklenburg. So I'll show you an example. Let's go all the way up here to Minnesota, and Cooching County, Minnesota, it looks like they moving to Mecklenburg was 0, and coming from Mecklenburg was 7. And then you can even look at the individual counties. Of course, a lot of people move in-state. So Cabarrus County had 2,145 moved to Mecklenburg from Cabarrus County, and coming from Mecklenburg going to Cabarrus was 3,883. And this one you can actually toggle back and forth with this up here. So this map shows coming to Mecklenburg. This map, if it still works, says leaving from Mecklenburg. So it shifts just a little bit, the color pattern shifts, but for the most part, the same counties that send people to Mecklenburg are the same counties that people tend to leave Mecklenburg for. And there you have it. You see just a couple sentences of chatter, a map of all the United States, and again, this tells a story, and heck, you might even want to play around with it yourself, or our readers might, to search their home county if they're not from the area. So you can do a lot with Tableau, a lot of things that we didn't have time to cover, but you have the program now. Feel free to experiment.